Hey everybody, welcome to Season 3 of Song Revolution. Get ready to ramp up your songwriting. Hey everybody, John Chisum here. Thank you so much for tuning again to Song Revolution. We are here to empower you, to encourage you, to inspire you, and to walk alongside you as you fulfill your passionate calling to write, sing, record, and release your music for the kingdom of God, to change the world, to impact people with your testimony, to draw people into worship, and to help them get to know Jesus the way you have. So thanks for sharing your time with us and being here today. I'm here with Bryant, Urich, and we're going to pick back up today with where we started a week ago. We had Kobe James here last week talking about home recording tips, and I don't believe in tips, tricks, and hacks, but we didn't really talk about that. But we talked.
You talk about the secrets,
insights,
the
secrets that have been kept from you for thousands of years, how to record great songs. But we're going to pick back up on that, and then our conversation the week before. When we were talking about, kind of moving from your phone recording to the world, from your work demo to the world. I wanted to pick back up on that because I think we hit on some great things. That because we have to start talking at the 30,000 foot view. I mean, we know we're writing songs. We know that we want to somehow record and release and market and promote. It's like the spokes in that wheel that we talked about. And this year, every month we're through our NCS 2025 Songwriting Challenge, the guide is available in the show notes, is to help the people who are following along grow in their ability, to do all of those things, right? But we have to kind of start at the 30,000 foot view and then kind of go granular. So I think where we ended last time was kind of understanding what makes for production-ready songs. Right? If you're going to spend money, if you're going to come to NCS and throw down, well,
they better be ready.
They better be ready.
Or you better get help to make them ready, right?
Yeah. Which is also why we're here, with our programs, and we'll talk more about that as we go. But let's just start kind of at the top of the show here. What makes for a production-ready song for you? As a songwriter, as a producer?
Well, we talked about last time, hearing the song in the simplest form. And I think for me, it's being able to, like, the song still hitting, if you will, in that simplest form. So can the song stand on its own without a big production, without 50 tracks going on, without, A-list players recording on the song? Can it stand, and there are countless songs that I've heard that just the most terrible, kids screaming in the background. There's all like a little phone recording, and I'm like, whoa, that song, that's it. Like, that's a great song. What was there was a Michael Farren song that we sent back and forth that was about
the one about his dad.
His dad,
oh my God,
leaving a voicemail. I can't remember. He may have released it by now. I need to see if I can go find it. But
Michael Farren is such a phenomenal writer.
Iconic Christian songwriter, and now does even some country stuff. But that's a song where I heard, he posted like a really rough video of him playing the song, and it brought me to tears.
You just cry, just weep.
Yeah, incredible song in the simplest form. And that's, in my opinion, that's a production-ready song, is when it speaks and it translates beyond the production.
Right? Well, I remember 40 years ago when I was working with Bill and Gloria Gaither, Bill would say, if you're not moved by a song sung a cappella, the production isn't going to make any difference, right?
Yeah, definitely.
I've lived by that.
Yeah. Well, and there's also, I'll contradict what I just said, because there is another side of, like we mentioned Forrest Frank on the last episode, where he's doing this kind of new modern pop thing. His song, it went kind of viral on TikTok and Instagram, but I'll Never Get Used to This. Have you heard that?
I haven't. I got to go.
It's the production actually, it actually makes the song. So it's like, I'll never get used to this. Ba-da-da. Like without that hook, that melodic hook, the song, he could play it. And it's a good song, but so there is a case for the production enhancing and like kind of making the song, but in our scenario today, like what we're talking about is the song standing on its own, and I even think those songs can stand on their own in a certain way, right?
Yeah,
without the production, but
it's a blend, but I would say for the majority of the time, if you don't have a great song to start with, the production's not going to make any difference. It's just going to bring out the flaws. I had a guy, it's probably in three or 4 years ago, someone contacted me and they really wanted me to hear the song. They really thought that we could put it out and have a big hit with it. And he said, I spent $8,000 on this recording. And he started naming all the top players in Nashville, some of whom I knew, some I didn't.
Yeah.
And when I listened to the song, I thought, what a waste of good money, you know?
Yeah.
And then I had another person that I worked with a number of years back, and they spent literally $88,000 on producing about 20-something songs. Ooh. And I thought, man, that producer ripped you off. Did not help that person at all. And I'm like, give me the $88,000. We'll do something really great with it, because we'll go back and we will fix these songs to where they're production worthy. And I think that's where I'd like to camp out today, is what makes production worthy songs, because going back into our studio and getting the great musicians is not together isn't going to make a great song. Yeah. It's just not going to do that.
Right.
So,
and you can take a song that's not ready to any studio, fill in the blank, and they'll produce your 9-minute song with 8 verses and lyrics that don't make sense. They'll do it just because it's a work for hire thing, and you could bring in the A-listers, spend $8,000. So that's what's really great about NCS, is giving people the full picture of, is this song ready? How do we get it ready? And, giving them the steps to get it to that point.
I mentioned Bill Gaither, Bill and Gloria, and I've shared my story many times on the show, so I won't, make it a long version today. But when I stumbled into Nashville in 1983 to take a church job that fell through, and we had $40 and no place to live, this August, my wife and I will celebrate, if she keeps me that long, 45 years of marriage. And we were newlyweds. We got married in 80, and this was 83, late 83. And I thought, wow, if I could ever get a song published, I could just die and go on to heaven, because that's what I wanted. I never dreamed, now looking back 42 years later, of what has happened. I could not have imagined it. But I, through a mutual friend, was introduced to Bill Gaither, and he listened to a song. He and the late Gary McSpadden listened to a song. And I don't know if God shut their ears to where they couldn't hear how bad that song was, or they just saw some potential, or maybe they had pity on me. I don't know.
Yeah.
But they were starting a new publishing company, and they signed me as a writer. And I started writing 5 nights a week, because I had odd jobs I was doing during the daytime.
Yeah.
And that was when I started learning how to write songs. They certainly didn't sign me because I was an A-level songwriter. I don't know.
Yeah.
But they started mentoring and coaching and pouring into me all of the things that I teach today, that we stand for here at NCS. That was when I started learning what it meant to write a song that could stand out above the rest. I mean, there were thousands of songs being written back then, pre-digital.
Yeah.
We couldn't just throw them out on Spotify. There was no Spotify or YouTube, back in that day. But that's when my eyes began to be open to what someone would take to a studio like a Bill Gaither and record. And I remember one particular song, a great songwriter named Dwight Lyles. He and I wrote a song, a novelty song, that we wrote it in a Manhattan Transfer jazzy kind of vocal style.
Yeah.
And it was can he, could he, would he, yes he can, he could, he would, and he did.
You
right?
blew my mind when we were sitting at lunch and you mentioned having written that song, and I was like, all my like church early days Southern gospel quartets,
right?
mind was blown.
Well, it was originally written as a Manhattan Transfer. If you know, they're kind of a jazz vocal. They were a jazz vocal ensemble back in the day. And we wrote it with that kind of voicing, chord progressions and all that. Well, Bill Gaither heard it, and he was going into the studio with the Cathedral Quartet.
Oh, yeah.
And they did, can you say me, could he? They did the very Southern gospel version.
Sure.
It's an iconic song,
it exploded,
right?
Yeah.
And all these years later, people still know it. One of my top copyrights ever. But that song, I could never have written that song. First of all, if it weren't for the genius of Dwight Lyles, he's just an amazing genius songwriter. But having grown a couple of years in my understanding of songwriting allowed me to be part of that song. You know, the hook was my idea. Dwight totally helped bring it to life, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But let me back up one step. When the Gaithers signed me to my publishing contract, my idea of what was a great song is very different than what it is now. I really felt like, because I was so deeply in love with God, in love with Jesus, because of all the great spiritual work and inspiration he had done in my life, that's what qualified me as a songwriter. That people would love my songs because I love Jesus, right?
Yeah.
And it's just not that. And we work with people every day who say, well, God gave me this song, or God inspired this song, or I felt, angels showing up in the room and I wrote this and now I want to go produce it. But that just doesn't really make for a production-ready song.
Right. Well, the inspiration might be there, the idea, the seed, but the skills or the craft is not at that same level yet. Would you say that's kind of it?
Well, it definitely is. That's what it is. And just because you've had a spiritual experience, don't want to discount that. Sure. But maybe the craft of writing a great song isn't as developed in your life yet, and you don't really totally understand what a great commercial hook, whether that's the lyrical hook, the title, or even a melodic hook, because they're both very vital to the success of a song. Maybe you're just not as developed yet in the skill side, even musically. Maybe you don't understand chord progressions yet, or how to craft verses and pre-choruses and choruses and bridges to the point where they could really stand out above the rest. And that's what the Gaithers taught me.
Yeah.
They raised my consciousness, if you will, of what it means to write that level of song. The former director of Lifeway Worship, actually my cousin by marriage, Mike Harlan, he used to say there's no such thing as a bad song. There are only good songs and commercial songs. And I like that, because sometimes people can be a little offended if you listen to their song and you're like, well, it's just not quite ready.
Yeah.
You can go to the studio and you can produce this out like we've been talking, but it's not going to make it a great song or a classic song.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, there's an interesting thought there, because we're sitting here in 2025, and you went on from that point to get deep into publishing and Integrity Music, and Star Song before that, then Integrity. So I'm curious, even the difference between back then as a publisher, because really you were the first step, right? A song really wouldn't make it even to a producer without a publisher going, this is a great song. Is that true?
That's totally true. I was a gatekeeper.
Yeah. So that was, say, the late 80s, early 90s. We're sitting here in 2025. And a lot of what's happening is this, we have technology at our fingertips. So, and you see this with artists and writers getting instant feedback on, hey, I just came up with this idea. Should I release it? Comment below, whatever. So there's this kind of like, I don't know, overwhelming sense of like instant feedback that you can get on social media on a song idea that's not necessarily an expert opinion, but it's someone on the other side of their phone being, being spoken to by your song. So it resonates with them. They say, yeah, wow, what a great song. You should release it. So I guess now seeing a song as production ready, how would you advise people versus like only being able to get an expert opinion to get to production back then versus now kind of this like putting it out to the world and letting the people say, yes, that's a great song, produce it. What's the difference there? Does that make sense at all? Like
that is great. And that's a great setup for our second half of the show today.
Hey,
so
there we go.
So let's take a quick break and come back, because how I want to respond to that is to talk about the different reasons to record and release your songs, because there are different levels or different reasons, and I want to break that down when we come back.
Love it.
All right. So again, we're going to take a quick break and bring you some important information, and see you on the other side, and we'll pick up where we're leaving off. What would it feel like to have 52 weeks of access to the right people in Nashville? People who've been making music for decades. People who can answer every question that you have about what pro-level music making is all about. Well, you can get that and more by joining NCS Community. Our community is a group of worldwide dedicated Christian songwriters who want what you want, to glorify God with your gifts and to get your music out there. I hope that you'll consider joining NCS Community today. All right, hey everybody, we're back. I hope that you will strongly consider joining us in NCS Community. You're not going to find anything like it at that investment price ever anywhere else. We want to be meeting with you every week and encourage you through an entire year of coaching, just really helping you ramp up, level up to what you feel in your heart. So before the break, Bryant teed me up to talk about kind of what was happening in the olden days back in the Wild Wild West.
Yeah. The gatekeeper to everyone's success.
Yeah.
John Chisum.
You know what? It was a whole different day.
Yeah.
And back pre-digital, pre-democratization of music, which is good and bad, I was one of the gatekeepers for really what was the largest Christian music company in the world at that time, Integrity Music.
Yeah.
They started out of Mobile, Alabama, out of a Christian ministry called New Wine Magazine. And at one point, they were shipping out 250,000 tapes, back in the day of tapes, cassette tapes, then it became CDs, every other month. It totally changed the face of worship.
Insane.
God used Integrity Music like no other company to reimagine worship.
Reach the world.
Reach the world.
That's crazy.
It just really was an avalanche of amazing worship.
Yeah.
And I had the privilege of moving from the Gaithers organization. I was VP of publishing for 7 years with them and moved to Mobile. Mobile's not the end of the earth, but you can see it from down there and on the Gulf down in Alabama. But
why? Because it's flat?
Say that again?
Because it's flat?
The world is flat.
Oh,
you can see it from there. I fell off once, but somebody caught me. And so I was managing 18 full-time songwriters and the entire copyright department and functioning as an A&R director. Over 200 pieces of product during my time there. Worked with Paul Balash, Linda Shazo, who wrote More Precious Than Silver, if you know that song.
Oh, yeah.
Some classic songs and great writers. And I got to be a writer and do a couple of albums as worship leader and writer for them. But that was right at the cusp of the transition from analog to digital. And back in that day, if you were heard as a songwriter, it was because you actually got a publisher to listen to your songs and then go produce them and release them into the marketplace. And so there was a certain standard that we got to uphold as gatekeepers to the world. And that's just the way it worked.
Yeah.
In the late 80s, when we all went digital, it flattened everything, and over the ensuing years became more and more accessible to where we're really in the Wild West now.
For
I
real,
mean,
yeah.
I joked a moment ago about back in the day. It wasn't the Wild West. We kind of had a control. There was a certain quality that we looked for, and that's how I could manage and work with people like Don Moen, who wrote. He didn't write Give Thanks. Henry Smith wrote Give Thanks. That was one of Don's big songs, but God Will Make a Way and other incredible songs. And the other writers, I signed Paul Balash because he was such a great writer, still is to this day. And the quality was there. And so we could actually be quality control. That's what went away.
Yep.
Quality control just disappeared. And that's why millions of songs are not heard and don't stand out above the milieu, a French song for morass.
A French
word. Did I say French song? Milieu.
If you want to title your French song.
We talk about song. My wife said that I can't put two sentences together unless it's about songwriting.
And it's
obviously, I can't even do it when I'm talking about songwriting. But yeah, I mean, we're in this deep ocean of mediocrity. And so my personal mission and the mission of NCS is to bring back quality control, because anybody can write and record a song on their cell phone, release it on Spotify in about 10 minutes, but it's just going to, without some wild virality happening, it's just insane. So what we're doing, our mission to empower Christian songwriters worldwide, is to help you level up the quality again so that you have the chance to go viral. So that's kind of the short version of an answer to your question. It's like, what's the difference today? And the difference is in quality, which I don't know, what kind of response do you have?
No, I mean, the pendulum swings, right, in like drastic directions. So now we're so far away from that quality control in an era where we have hundreds of thousands of songs being released a day,
every day,
to digital streaming platforms. And I think we're already feeling, the industry's already feeling that push to bring back quality control. And so you see like Spotify cracking down on certain things, distributors. I think, and this is totally just my look into the future, but I think that distributors will begin cracking down on what they allow, because at some point, if there's so much noise happening, then just no one's getting heard, right? Or you're having to just pour money into exposure, which would be like giving the Facebook monster more money to get your song out in front, or Spotify. Like, everybody's making money from advertising, but I think that eventually that pendulum has swung so far this direction. I think it's already kind of starting to pull back. And so, like you said, what we're trying to do is bring an avenue or a step-by-step process for people to understand what a great song is at the core of it. Like, and starting with the song, right? And then going into production. But it's interesting, your experience as a publisher obviously plays so much into what we do here, and it's really the basis for what NCS is. What would you say, I mean, as we're talking about production-ready songs, back in the day when you heard a song for the first time, you really were the person that would pass it on to the producer. So what were some of those things from your perspective that would make, you asked me earlier what would make for a production-ready song. What are those things that you look for with your experience in publishing when you hear a song for the first time?
I learned on the job. And I had the blessing, as I said earlier, of being mentored and coached by some of the best ever, even to this moment, Bill and Gloria Gaither, other people whose names our listeners would not know because they were behind the scenes. and even other songwriters. I mentioned Dwight Lyles earlier for Candy Cootie Woody.
Yeah.
I learned so much from co-writing with Dwight and other writers whose names, kind of have faded, but they taught me what writing commercially was all about. And so there is somewhat of an intangible thing to hearing a song, even in the rough, and knowing that there's a diamond in there somewhere. Some of that is intuitive, some of that is spiritual, some of that is just the feels, right? But a whole lot of it is not. A whole lot of it is understanding how convoluted a verse can be when someone throws in 18 ideas and each line is completely disconnected.
Yep.
You start with one topic in the first line and then you change it in the second, and then you change it again in the third and the fourth, and then the pre-chorus is anybody's guess. And so by the time you get to the chorus, you don't know what the heck the song's even about. That's simple math. That's pretty easy, right?
Sure.
And I learned that the first thing that I ever began to recognize as a publisher was that there's a principle of cohesiveness in a lyric. And I became a publisher because I was very aggressive about connecting people and about connecting the writer with a producer with an A&R person. And I was unafraid to learn, to reach out, to ask people for advice, because I quickly found, Bill, here's something that Bill used to say. I had the privilege of playing him songs every week, and he would listen to it, he and Gary McSpadden and Gloria Gaither, and Bill would say, well, yeah, it's nice, but who's going to care about this in 100 years? And that would elevate my thinking about the song itself. It's like, okay, that idea is not big enough to be around in 100 years.
Wow.
Right? Yeah. Or Gary McSpadden would say, well, I really hear your heart, and I know you love the Lord, and you go to church all the time, but this just really isn't up to where a lot of people are going to like it.
Yeah.
And it challenged me. It kind of hurt my feelings a little bit, but it made me think. Right? And so as I started understanding what they were saying, the first concept that I got was that I was throwing in a lot of religious popcorn. I might have 8 different references to 8 different scriptures in a song. For God so loved the world that we're going to see him coming on a white horse, and the Lord is my shepherd. So Jesus loves me, this I know. It's like, it was just crazy because but I had a heart for God, had a heart for Jesus, had a heart for all that, but I didn't know what I was doing with the craft. And that was the first thing I saw, was that a song needs to be logical and cohesive. And from there, I pieced together the entire coaching program that we use today to help writers be effective. And it taught me how to be a publisher, and it taught me, as I interacted with Greg Nelson, who was the top CCM producer back in the 80s, Sandy Patty and Larnell Harris and Steve Green, and those iconic names that helped blaze the trail for the Chris Tomlins and the Lauren Daigles of today. We stand on their shoulders, right?
For sure.
But Greg, the feedback I would get from Greg, was tremendous. And there were songs he hated that I would bring to him. And he was a very direct kind of guy. Greg, if you ever, watch this podcast, thank you. You were so intimidating. You scared the poop out of me. But wow, I was so scared to play songs for him, right?
Yeah.
And so, I remember the first song he ever liked that I pitched to him was a song called "A Mighty Fortress Is Our God." And I wrote it with the late Bill George. And it wound up being recorded by Larnell Harris. Huge hit for him. 30 years later, it's still his signature song.
Wow.
But I was so scared, but it was okay. I overcame my fear. I'd play him everything he'd listened to whenever he was doing a record. But how he responded to the songs helped me learn and grow. And I think sometimes writers are not open to feedback. Really, they want you to love their song the way they wrote it.
Ooh,
right?
That's a good one.
And so the first thing I learned was to learn from feedback.
Yeah.
Whether it was Gaithers or McSpadden or Greg Nelson or other people in the industry at the time.
Yeah.
And so I was able to take that in and then bring it out to my writers. I remember one thing, Paul Baloche, who was a great writer, open the eyes of my heart, Lord, or above all power, above all thrones, so many more, great songs. He credits me with challenging him to be a better writer, to even do something as simple as add a second verse. Sounds crazy now, but back in the day, when he came on with me at Integrity, he was kind of a one verse songwriter.
Yeah. I can see, open the eyes of my heart. Great example. Like very simple.
And I challenged him. I'm like, Paul, it's a great verse.
Yeah.
But songs these days have a second verse, and so that was a challenge to him, but he learned to be a great second verse songwriter because of that challenge from a publisher.
Wow.
So the role of a publisher is to help you be a better songwriter by challenging your deficiencies, right? But if you're not open to feedback...
Yeah.
So...
You're not going to grow, and you're not going to... Yeah. Wow. That's such a cool perspective, man. The line that Bill said, who's going to care about this in 100 years?
Right.
That instantly makes you go, whoa, there's something more to write for, a bigger picture, a timeless like song is really the goal.
Exactly. I think that I have 2 songs in my whole, I've had over 400 songs published and recorded, and we're still putting out songs now, but I think I've got 2 that could possibly be around after I go home to be with Jesus.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, Mighty Cross, that I wrote with David Baroni. It's in a couple of hymnals, and a song I wrote with George Searcy called Christ Above Me, that's based on the 4th century breastplate of St. Patrick. Go look it up.
Whoa.
And I think those 2 songs could outlive me. Out of all the hundreds,
Yeah.
And when you think about a lot of the songs released today, maybe a song like My Chains Are Gone, I've Been Set Free, Chris Tomlin's addition to Amazing Grace, that could probably be around, right?
Yeah.
But In Christ Alone, I refer to that all the time because I think that song will be around, and maybe another small handful of the Gettys and small handful of Tomlins, as popular as they are now.
Yeah.
But will other songs that we like because they're popular right now, will they be around? I don't know.
It's a great question. I'm thinking even like a mainstream pop example would be like a Call Me Maybe or something. Pops up and is really popular for a second, but then kind of, it's not a timeless song,
right?
Versus like a I Will Always Love You, like a Whitney Houston, timeless concept. Both songs served a purpose, but one is timeless and will be remembered for decades on decades.
And I think that brings up a point I'd like to kind of wrap up with today. There are different purposes and reasons to record songs, to write and record songs. There's that whole group of people, that milieu of people that they want to write because they want to be famous or they want to be something.
Yeah.
And then you've got people that write because they feel like they've got a strong message. We worked a couple of years ago with one of our NCS collective artists, Patrina Pacheco. And Patrina, wonderful story. I have a whole video podcast out with her that you filmed for us, telling her story. She was a battered woman. Her life was in danger. She escaped, had to go into hiding, became an alcoholic, then came back to Jesus. And now she has this incredible ministry. Put a plug in for Patrina's work, and we co-wrote and produced a record for her about 3 years ago. It's a great record, and it's kind of in the Katie Nicole Ann Wilson kind of genre, that country roots Christian. It's a great record, and it has opened up a great ministry for her. But her ministry is to battered women, to people that have alcoholism, or people that really need recovery and healing. And so that's a reason to write and record songs.
Totally.
Right. And then some other people that we've worked with, that we're currently working with in our NCS collective, people that have gone through our programs. We talk about Anya Lee, who actually died on the Appalachian Trail in 2019. They revived her. God had been speaking to her about making music, and she'd put it off.
Wow. And
just in the last week, she had a song debut at number 5 on the Apple curated playlist, What's New in Gospel Music. And so she has a reason.
It's her story back again.
It's her story back again, yeah. So that she has a purpose and a reason, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. Who else are we working with that are exhibiting that kind of purpose?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, we're working on a record this month with Howard Grip, right? Who's come into our world, and he has a purpose. He's given his life to the Lord in the last, I think, 5-ish years, maybe a little more, but totally turned his life around, and used to play rock and roll and Pearl Jam and all that stuff. And now he's totally given his ministry over to the Lord, which is so cool. Has a great testimony. So, again, will his songs ever be played on K-Love? Who knows? Jury's out. But I think the mission is the most important thing, and in your specific mission, right? So it's not about coming to someone like NCS or a publisher and going, make me famous, like you said.
Right.
It's let me be faithful to what I've been given, and let me steward the calling on my life, and tell my story, and be faithful to my testimony. And that's what I love seeing, regardless of where the songs go, or how much commercial success there is to a song. It's, were you true to what you felt like was, what you were called to do?
Dude,
or,
that's worth the whole show right there.
Yeah.
And what I love about what we get to do through our NCS community group program 101 and artist development is we get to birth ministries. And that's it.
Yeah.
I don't even really consider us in the music business. I mean, we kind of are, but it really is about birthing ministries.
Yeah.
So
that's so cool.
Maybe next time we can talk about Ezra Worship Initiative, another group that we're working with. Bonnie Barbet, who is a prolific songwriter, and so many others that we're working with here.
Yeah.
It's just a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we should go ahead and land the plane.
Let's do it
for today. So you guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Again, we're in a year-long songwriting challenge. I've written a 31-page downloadable PDF, our NCS 2025 Songwriting Challenge Guide, where we help you to focus on and add to your songwriting toolkit one new skill per month. Imagine where you could be in a year if you follow along, tune into the podcast, join us for our free monthly songwriting training, and then consider joining NCS Community and checking out all of the programs that we offer to empower you as a Christian songwriter. Thanks for joining us on Song Revolution. We'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us on today's show. If you got some value, please help us share the love. Leave a like and a share and a good review. Be sure to check out everything that we have to offer you at NashvilleChristianSongwriters.com. We'll see you next time.